Have you ever stood in the kitchen, opened a cabinet, and suddenly forgotten why you were there? You pause, confused, for just a second. You laugh it off. Must be my age, you say to yourself. But deep down, something doesn't sit quite right. That's exactly how it started for my neighbor Frank. He was the guy everyone called the sharp one, Navy veteran, crossword champ, kept his yard like a golf course. But over one winter, things began to change. First, he started forgetting names. Then he called his microwave the dishwasher. One day, he knocked on my door asking where his mailbox had gone. It hadn't moved. He had. Most of us believe that memory loss is just part of getting older, that a little forgetfulness here and there is normal. But what if I told you the science says otherwise? What if those tiny lapses, the quiet changes in how we walk, sweep, or speak, aren't just senior moments? They could be signals, early signals from the brain, not to scare you, but to warn you. Because dementia doesn't begin with forgetting birthdays or getting lost on the highway. It begins much earlier, in small, quiet ways, in the body, in the senses, in how we sweep, feel, and even how we stand. And here's the part no one tells you. When these signals are caught early, we can slow the decline. We can protect what matters most, our independence, our memories, our joy. That's why today, we're walking through the 10 subtle but powerful early signs of dementia. The ones that most people overlook, the ones that Frank missed, and the ones that, if recognized in time, could make all the difference for you or someone you love. So take a deep breath, pour a cup of tea, and let's begin this conversation with care, not fear. And if at any point this resonates with you, go ahead and tap that little subscribe button so we can stay connected. You're not alone on this journey, and I'm honored to walk it with you. Now, let's talk about the first sign, one that starts not in your head, but in your feet. Let me tell you about Harold. Harold was one of those men who made retirement look good. He wore crisp polo shirts, played golf every Thursday, and still walked taller than men half his age. You'd see him strolling the neighborhood with his driver over his shoulder, like he was born on the fairway. But last spring, something changed. He started taking the stairs one at a time, slow and cautious. His wife noticed he was dragging one foot just a little, almost like his legs forgot to lift. His once confident stride had become hesitant, unsure. And when they went out for lunch, he fumbled with his fork, as if his hand no longer listened to his brain. At first, they laughed it off. Maybe it was arthritis. Maybe it was just age. But when Harold stopped golfing, when he said the steps down to the tee box felt too risky, they both knew it was time to look deeper. You see, the way we move tells a story. Changes in posture, balance, or gait aren't just about sore knees or getting older. The brain plays a major role in how we walk, stand, and coordinate everyday tasks. The parts responsible for movement and control can begin to shift long before we notice memory issues. Shorter steps, a slight lean to one side, difficulty holding a cup without spilling. These aren't just quirks. They're whispers from the nervous system, small signs that something inside may be out of sync. And here's the good news. If caught early, these signs can lead to real answers. A neurologist can run simple tests to check how your brain is communicating with your body. You might do a walking assessment, a balance check, or a scan to look for subtle changes in the brain's motor centers. These are painless, often quick, and they can help separate ordinary aging from something more serious. If you've noticed yourself walking more slowly or feeling unsteady on steps that used to feel easy, don't ignore it. It's not about fear. It's about listening. Your body remembers before your mind does. And sometimes, what starts in the feet points us toward a deeper truth in the brain. Now, let's keep going, because the next sign doesn't show up in how you move, but in how you see the world around you. Now let me introduce you to Lorraine. Lorraine was the kind of woman who knew every aisle of her grocery store like the back of her hand. She could find the best cantaloupe by feel and never once needed a shopping list. But not long ago, something shifted. One morning, she called her daughter in tears. She had gone to the store as usual, But halfway through, she froze. She couldn't figure out where she was or why the shelves felt like they were closing in. That day, she bumped into two end caps, dropped a bottle of juice trying to pour it at lunch, and said she couldn't smell the flowers her neighbor brought over. It was easy to chalk it up to being tired or distracted, but her daughter knew better. She started paying closer attention. What Lorraine was experiencing wasn't just clumsiness. It was a change in spatial awareness and sensory perception. The brain doesn't just store memory. It helps us navigate the world around us. The temporal lobe, the part deep inside near your ears, helps process smell, sight, and the sense of where your body is in space. When that area starts to weaken, simple things, like pouring coffee without spilling, judging the distance between your foot and the curb, or staying steady in a crowded store, become more difficult. And here's something most people don't realize. A declining sense of smell is often one of the earliest clues in Alzheimer's disease. If your favorite candle no longer has a scent, or your morning bacon smells bland, that's not just aging. It could be your brain's way of telling you something is changing. For families and caregivers, this is a moment to gently observe. If someone you love is bumping into things, missing steps, or having trouble with everyday coordination, try walking with them through familiar spaces. Watch how they move. Ask if they can smell their coffee or taste their dinner. These questions can be windows into early signs the brain is giving. With Lorraine, the moment her daughter noticed the pattern, she encouraged her mom to talk to her doctor. They caught the signs early. That gave Lorraine time. Time to understand. Time to adjust. Time to stay independent a little longer. And that's the hope behind every story we tell here. So now let's shift our focus to something just as subtle. It's not in how we walk or how we see. It's in the strength of our hands. 3. Try this with me right now. Reach for a jar. Maybe pickles or jam. Something with a good tight lid. Hold it steady. Now twist. Was it smooth and easy? Or did your hand hesitate? Maybe just for a second longer than it used to? We often think of memory as something that lives only in our minds. But sometimes, the body remembers first, and one of the earliest messengers is your grip. Researchers have found something remarkable: a decline in hand strength. Especially when there's no arthritis or injury involved, can be one of the first signs that something deeper is shifting, that the brain's connection to muscle is beginning to fray long before obvious memory loss appears. It's not really about opening jars. It's about the small daily tasks that used to feel effortless. Holding a coffee mug, writing a note, brushing your hair. When those motions become shaky or tiring, it may not just be aging. It may be the nervous system sending a quiet message. Pay attention, something's changing. Let me tell you about June. She wasn't a bodybuilder, but she loved knitting blankets for her grandkids. One day, she dropped her needles 3 times in a row and couldn't finish the row. She laughed it off and said her hands were just being clumsy that day. But her daughter noticed the handwriting on the birthday card that week. It looked uneven, wobbly, almost like it had been written by someone else. The truth was, her grip strength had quietly slipped, and her brain had something to do with it. Here's the hopeful part. Grip strength is one of the most modifiable early indicators of cognitive health. That means you can do something about it. Just a few minutes a day, squeezing the softball, stretching resistance bands, light wrist curls while watching TV. These aren't workouts. They're small acts of maintenance, like oiling a door hinge before it squeaks. And it's not just physical. Every time your hands move with intention, they light up brain pathways like street lamps in the dark. June started doing her morning hand warm-ups. That was the name she gave to squeezing therapy putty while listening to classical music. After a few weeks, she said she felt steadier, not just in her hands, but in her spirit. So if the lid felt a little tighter than usual just now, don't ignore it. It might just be a lid, but it might also be your body whispering, "I need a little more care today." And that care can make all the difference. Now let's move to another early sign. One that shows up not in the hands, But in the dreams, my dad used to sleep like a rock. He'd fall asleep with the TV still glowing, arms folded, dog snoring at his feet. 8 hours, no interruptions. You could set your watch by him. But then the nights started changing. At first, it was little things, tossing and turning more than usual, talking in his sleep. Then came the dreams, wild, vivid ones. He'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, convinced someone had been in the room. He started napping during the day, not just once in a while, but often, sometimes for hours. And by evening, he looked more tired than when he woke up. We thought it was stress, maybe age catching up, but deep down, we knew something was off. Turns out, those sleep disruptions weren't just bad dreams, they were early signs of something deeper. Doctors later explained that certain types of dementia, like Lewy body dementia and even Alzheimer's, can show up first in the way we sleep. Long before memory fades, the brain begins to lose its rhythm. You might notice excessive daytime sleepiness, even in someone who never used to nap, or vivid nightmares, the kind that leave you shaken in the morning. Some people talk, move, even shout in their sleep. These are all signs that the brain's control over sleep cycles may be faltering. It's important to resist the urge to self-diagnose or self-medicate. Over-the-counter sleep aids might seem like a quick fix, but they often make things worse by masking the real issue or interfering with deep sleep. Instead, if you or someone close to you is experiencing sleep changes that don't feel normal, talk to a specialist. A sleep study can uncover whether there's an underlying condition. More importantly, it opens the door to care that's thoughtful and proactive. Sleep is when the brain does its cleanup. It's when toxins clear out and healing begins. Without it, even a healthy brain can begin to struggle. My dad didn't just get his rest back. He got his energy back, his clarity, his spark. And now, speaking of sparks, let's talk about something that quietly dims long before we notice. Not in the body and not in the sleep, but in the heart. Let's look at how losing interest in life might be more than just a mood. Did you know that over 35% of older adults quietly withdraw from social activities sooner than they expected? It doesn't always start with sadness or illness. Often, it begins with something as simple as saying no to lunch plans, then skipping church just once, then forgetting to return a phone call. Little by little, the world feels more distant, and sometimes that distance is the first signal of something deeper happening inside the brain. It's a shift that's easy to overlook, because there's no headline moment, no announcement, just a quiet pulling away from the things that once brought joy. That's what happened with Evelyn. She used to be the spark of every Sunday potluck. Everyone waited for her peach cobbler and her piano playing at the end of service. She loved chatting about her childhood, about growing up in a little town with big family stories. She was always smiling, always connecting. Then one season, she began saying she was too tired to attend. She skipped choir rehearsal, missed her best friend's birthday lunch. One day, she told her daughter the piano just took up too much space. Then she gave it away. At first, it looked like she was just slowing down. But then something else shifted. Her daughter came by with an old Frank Sinatra record they used to dance to in the kitchen. Evelyn didn't smile. She asked to turn it off, said it was too loud, too much. What Evelyn was experiencing wasn't just low mood. It was a kind of emotional flatness, a gentle turning away from life. And while it may not look alarming on the surface, apathy like this can be one of the early signs of cognitive decline. It's not the same as depression. With depression, people often feel sadness, guilt, or hopelessness. With dementia-related apathy, it's more of an emptiness, a lack of feeling, as if the brightness of the world has slowly faded and nothing calls them forward anymore. What makes this sign tricky is how quietly it arrives. There are no tears, no dramatic changes, just silence. But that silence matters, because staying socially and emotionally engaged is one of the most important ways to protect the brain. If you notice someone beginning to withdraw, There are gentle ways to help. Don't push. Just sit together. Invite them to join you on a walk, even if they say little. Bring something familiar, like a favorite dessert or an old photo album. And never underestimate the power of music. A song from their youth can open doors that conversation cannot. Evelyn's daughter began visiting every Friday afternoon with a thermos of tea and a playlist of their old favorites. At first, Evelyn said nothing, but one day, during Moon River, she closed her eyes and began to hum. It was small, but it was something. Sometimes, when the mind starts drifting, all it takes is one note to bring someone gently back to themselves. Now let's turn our attention to something just as subtle. A change not in feeling, but in speaking. When someone begins to lose their words, they may be telling us more than they can say. 6. Walter always had a way with words. He could talk to anyone, anywhere. At the hardware store, he'd chat with strangers like old friends. At dinner, he told stories so vivid you could taste the details. But not long ago, something started slipping. He began searching for words in the middle of a sentence, common ones like table or window. Sometimes he'd say the wrong word entirely, calling the refrigerator a mailbox. Other times, he'd stop talking altogether, staring off as if the word he wanted had vanished midair. At first, his family thought he was just tired, but then he started repeating himself, telling the same story 2 or 3 times in the same meal, not realizing he had already said it. What was happening to Walter was more than forgetfulness. It was a disruption in the brain's ability to find and form words. Scientists call this area Broca's region, located in the left side of the brain. It's like a bridge between thought and speech. When that bridge weakens, the words still exist in the mind, but they struggle to reach the tongue. This can be one of the earliest and most frustrating signs of cognitive decline. And not just for the person experiencing it. Loved ones often feel helpless, unsure of how to respond. But there are gentle ways to support the brain and keep that language bridge strong. One simple way is through daily vocal practice. Reading aloud, even just 5 minutes a day, can keep the rhythm of speech alive. Reciting short poems or singing familiar songs helps reconnect patterns in the brain. Writing by hand, whether it's a journal entry or a note to a friend, also activates memory and language centers. Walter's daughter started writing little prompts for him each morning. A question, a memory, a funny quote. Some days he'd respond with just a sentence. Other days, he'd write a whole story. Over time, those little exercises became like walking paths, helping him find his way back to words. And now, from the mind's voice, we turn to its memory, because the next sign is one many people fear the most. It begins quietly, but it touches everything. Let's talk about memory loss. Not the little slips, but the kind that changes how we live. 7. Marjorie had always been the storyteller of the family. At every holiday, she'd tell the one about her honeymoon road trip with Jim, the flat tire in Kansas, and how they ate pie with strangers who became lifelong friends. Everyone knew the story. They still laughed every time she told it, but lately she'd begun to tell it twice, sometimes 3 times, in the same afternoon. One evening, her grandson gently said, "Grandma, you just told us that." She blinked, smiled, and said, "Did I? Well, I suppose it's worth hearing again." Later that night, she asked what time dinner would be. Her daughter answered. 5 minutes later, she asked again. Then again. These weren't just cute quirks or moments of distraction. Marjorie's brain had begun struggling to hold on to new memories. The past, those stories she had told 100 times, stayed clear as day. But anything new faded quickly, like a note written in chalk before the rain. That's what happens when short-term memory falters. The brain receives the information, but fails to store it properly. Without that, everything feels like new again, even if it just happened. And while it can be painful to witness, there are simple ways to help. Using a whiteboard in the kitchen with the day's plans can offer grounding. Notes on the fridge, sticky reminders by the bedside, or voice memos on a phone can gently reinforce routine and ease confusion. Even saying things out loud a few times can help new information settle in just a little longer. Marjorie's family started writing down the dinner plan each night. They placed a little card by her chair at the table. It didn't fix the forgetting, but it softened the moment. It gave her something to trust. Now, from memories that fade too quickly, we move to something just as tricky. Not what we forget, but how we decide. Let's look at the quiet shifts in judgment that can lead us into trouble without even knowing why. 8. Mrs. Jean had always been sharp with numbers. She balanced her checkbook to the penny, remembered the price of milk from 1965, and could calculate a dinner tip faster than any calculator. But last month, something unexpected happened. She went to her local pharmacy to pick up a refill. When it came time to pay, she pulled out her credit card and entered the wrong PIN. The cashier gently asked her to try again. She did. Then again. By the fourth attempt, her card was locked. Flustered, she mumbled something about needing to call her bank. But what really shook her wasn't the mistake. It was how confused she felt standing there. She had used that same card for years. Now the steps felt jumbled, like pieces of a puzzle she used to know by heart. That moment was about more than just a transaction. It was a glimpse into something deeper. When the brain begins to lose its ability to organize thoughts and make decisions, even familiar tasks like paying for medicine or refilling a prescription can become overwhelming. This isn't about forgetfulness. It's about judgment, about processing steps and solving simple problems. Things that once felt automatic now require extra effort. But there are ways to make life easier and more gentle. Creating checklists for daily routines can be a lifesaver. Step-by-step guides for paying bills, taking medication, or grocery shopping can restore confidence. Having a trusted family member or friend nearby during more complex tasks helps reduce stress and prevent mistakes. Mrs. Jean's daughter started keeping a small card in her wallet with the steps written out, just in case. It gave her something to hold on to, both physically and mentally. It helped her feel in control again. Now let's take that sense of uncertainty a step further. Because when decision-making becomes difficult, orientation often follows. Up next, we'll talk about how time and place can quietly slip away, and how easy it is to get lost in places that once felt like home. Every morning, Howard liked to start his day with oatmeal and the newspaper. But one Tuesday, he stood in the kitchen holding a spoon, staring at the stove. The oatmeal box was out. The kettle was warm, but he couldn't remember why he was there. A minute later, he walked back to the living room and asked his wife what day it was. She smiled and said, "Tuesday, dear." He paused. "Are you sure? I thought it was Sunday." At first, it seemed harmless, a moment of forgetfulness. But it began to happen more often. Not just forgetting the day, but missing doctor's appointments, leaving the house and forgetting which street to turn on. One morning, he took a short walk around the block and didn't come back for an hour. A neighbor found him 3 streets over, confused and out of breath. Losing track of time or place can be frightening, for the person going through it, and for the people who love them. When the brain's internal clock starts to misfire, even familiar routines can feel strange. The kitchen becomes unfamiliar. The days of the week blur. Rooms that were once second nature start to feel like a maze. But there are tools that can help restore a sense of steadiness. Simple devices, like a large clock that shows the full date and time, can bring clarity. Digital frames that display daily reminders or routines can offer gentle cues. And for those who may wander outside, GPS-enabled bracelets or smart tags can bring peace of mind. They're not just about safety. They're about dignity, about allowing independence while quietly offering protection. Howard's family installed a talking calendar that greeted him each morning with the day, the weather, and his morning plan. It became part of his routine, a small voice reminding him, "You're not lost. You're here. And today, this is what we're doing." Now, let's talk about one of the most overlooked, yet exhausting signs. The endless repetition, the same question asked again and again. Not to annoy, but because the brain is trying its best to hold on. Let's explore why that happens and what we can gently do in return. One winter afternoon, Helen opened the freezer to grab some soup and found her cell phone nestled between a bag of peas and a box of fish sticks. She chuckled at first. "Well, I must have been distracted," she said. But later that evening, she whispered to her daughter that someone was standing outside the window. No one was there. Over the next few weeks, it happened again. A shadow, she swore, moved in the hallway. A voice she thought she heard whisper her name. Then one morning, she didn't make it to the bathroom in time, and tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know what's happening to me," she said softly. These are not easy moments to talk about. They're often the ones people try to hide, out of embarrassment or fear. But hallucinations, misplaced items in strange places, and loss of bladder control can be late-stage signals that the brain's ability to process and manage is breaking down. They don't mean a person is losing their mind. They mean their brain is struggling to interpret reality clearly. And when caught early, these signs give families a chance to prepare, to understand, to plan gently for more support before crisis sets in. The most important thing you can do when faced with these behaviors is stay calm. If someone sees a person who isn't there, resist the urge to correct or argue. Instead, offer reassurance. Shift their focus to something grounding. Turn on soft music. Light a familiar candle. Bring them into another room. And when something's been lost in a strange place, like keys in the microwave or pills in a sock drawer, try not to scold. These are signs of confusion, not carelessness. Helen's daughter started labeling drawers with pictures and words. She placed a motion light in the hallway to help guide nighttime trips to the restroom. Small changes, but they made Helen feel less afraid, less lost in her own home. Now that we've gently explored the signs, let's shift towards something even more important. What can be done? Because noticing early is only the beginning. Up next, we'll talk about real steps you can take to protect your mind and your independence, starting today. When the signs begin to show, the hardest part often isn't the memory loss or confusion. It's the quiet feelings no one talks about. Many people, like Ruth, feel fear, not just of forgetting, but of becoming someone they no longer recognize. Some feel shame. They know something is changing inside, but can't quite put words to it. There's an ache that comes with wondering, am I still me? For those standing beside them, the feelings are just as real. Caregivers often carry a deep weight. The daughter who works full-time and checks in every night. The husband who repeats the same answer again and again with a tired smile. There is pressure. There is guilt. There is exhaustion. But here's something worth holding on to. Action can bring clarity. Early steps can make a world of difference, not just in medical care, but in peace of mind. If you or someone you love is experiencing any of the signs we've talked about today, start by seeing a doctor. Sometimes symptoms that look like dementia are caused by other treatable issues. A deficiency in vitamin B12, a thyroid imbalance, a medication reaction. You deserve to know what's really going on. If a diagnosis does come, it's not the end of the road. It's the beginning of a different kind of planning. One with purpose, one that gives you back a sense of control. Gather important documents. Assign a trusted power of attorney. Talk openly with your family about medical wishes. These conversations can feel difficult at first, but they are gifts in disguise. They spare loved ones from guessing. They protect your voice, even when you might no longer be able to speak for yourself. And if you are a caregiver, know this: you are not expected to do this alone. There are support groups in every state, online communities where people just like you share stories, ask questions, and lean on one another. Local churches, senior centers, even neighborhood circles often have resources waiting. Asking for help is not weakness, it's wisdom. Ruth's son, after months of holding it all together, finally reached out to a local Alzheimer's support group. He said later it felt like someone had opened a window. The air was easier to breathe, the path forward a little less dark. So if you felt afraid or overwhelmed, pause here with me. Breathe. You are not alone. There is help. There is hope. There is still time to act with intention. Now that we've talked about recognizing and responding to the early signs, let's take a deeper look at how we can actively protect brain health. The choices we make every day may be more powerful than we ever imagined. Harold always used to say, if you don't use it, you lose it. He was talking about his old fishing gear at the time, but it turns out that simple phrase holds true for the brain too. Our minds, just like our muscles, need activity to stay strong. And even in our 60s, 70s, and beyond, there's still so much we can do to protect our memory and thinking. Let's start with something called cognitive reserve. That's a fancy term, but it simply means giving your brain enough backup pathways to stay sharp, even if some areas begin to slow. The way to build that reserve is through learning. Try something new. Take up watercolor painting or start learning a musical instrument you've always wanted to play but never found the time. Learn a new language or even just a few words each day. Read books that challenge your thinking. Play strategy games. These small acts stretch the brain, keep it flexible, and encourage it to form new connections. Movement matters just as much. Regular physical activity increases blood flow to the brain, which helps with focus and memory. You don't have to run a marathon. A brisk walk around the block, light hand weights while watching television, a water aerobics class with friends. These kinds of gentle movement bring oxygen to the brain and support long-term health. And of course, what we eat makes a difference. The Mediterranean and Mayan diets are among the most studied when it comes to brain protection. They focus on whole foods, leafy grains, berries, olive oil, legumes, and healthy fats like those in salmon and walnuts. They also recommend cutting back on processed sugar and fried foods, which can trigger inflammation and slow down thinking. Quality sleep is another pillar. When we rest deeply, the brain clears out waste and strengthens connections formed during the day. Try going to bed and waking up at the same time each day. Keep screens off an hour before sleep. Create a quiet, dark space where your mind can settle and recharge. If sleep issues are a struggle, speak with a doctor. It's worth addressing. Lastly, protect your brain from toxins that steal its clarity. That means quitting smoking if you hadn't already, and keeping alcohol intake light. Even small reductions can improve circulation and reduce the risk of memory loss over time. Harold, who once thought it was too late to change, started walking 20 minutes a day and swapped his usual snack for blueberries and almonds. He took up sketching in the evenings just for fun. A year later, he said he felt more alert, more like himself again. The truth is, it's never too late to tend to your brain like the garden it is. Feed it, move it, rest it, challenge it, and watch it grow in ways you didn't expect. Up next, let's take a look at where hope is growing in the world of treatment. Because even as we take action in our own homes, science is moving forward too. There are new therapies on the horizon that may one day change everything. Not long ago, the word dementia carried very little hope. Doctors could explain the symptoms, offer support, and suggest ways to cope. But when it came to slowing the disease itself, the options were limited. That's beginning to change. Today, we're seeing the first glimmers of something we haven't had before. Real medical breakthroughs. 2 new medications, lecanemab and donanemab, have been making headlines. These treatments don't cure dementia, but they do something powerful. They help slow the progression of certain forms of Alzheimer's, by targeting harmful proteins in the brain before they cause too much damage. Think of them like gentle breaks applied early, giving families more time. More birthdays, more stories, more mornings with clarity. Alongside medication, technology is stepping in to help in ways we couldn't have imagined a decade ago. Artificial intelligence is now being used to detect early signs of cognitive decline, from how someone types a message to subtle changes in speech patterns. These tools can quietly pick up on shifts that the human eye might miss. This kind of early insight can guide someone toward help long before their symptoms interfere with daily life. There are also apps that gently prompt memory tasks, digital assistants that help organize the day, and home sensors that can alert caregivers if a routine suddenly changes. These aren't just gadgets. They are gentle lifelines, helping people live more safely and independently. But even as science advances, one truth remains. The most powerful treatment still begins at home. A brain that is nurtured by movement, learning, purpose, and care can hold on longer. A life filled with connection and consistency can soften the edges of decline. And when that is paired with early medical care, the result is not just longer life, but better life. This is where we are headed, a world where early action matters, where treatments work alongside lifestyle, where people are no longer surprised by dementia, but prepared. Not afraid, but hopeful. So now, before we close, let's take a breath together. We've covered a lot, but there's one more thing I want to leave you with. A final word about the importance of noticing, of caring, of believing that even small steps today can shape a brighter tomorrow. You don't have to go through this alone. Whether it's you or someone you care about showing early signs of dementia, taking that first step to understand it is not just smart. It is an act of love. Love for yourself, love for your family, love for the memories still waiting to be made. Early action gives us options. It gives us time, and most of all, it gives us the chance to keep choosing how we want to live. So, if this video has helped you, even in some small way, I invite you to share it. You never know who in your life might need to hear these words today. Your decision to pass this along could be the reason someone gets help in time. Thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Healthy Aging Vault. We believe in living with awareness, grace, and hope. Until next time, take care of your mind, take care of each other, and know that you are not alone.